Everybody, I'm glad you're here. I'm happy to be here. My name is Chip MacGregor. If you don't know me, that's perfectly okay. It's the first time I've been to this conference. But just so you know, a little introduction. So I've been in publishing since I was 19 years old. My family, Scottish immigrants. Neither of my parents went to high school, so when I'm the youngest of 8 kids, and so when I went off to college, nobody had ever been to college before, and I had to pay my way through. And in those days, you went down to the office, the employment office, which had little jobs written on 3x5 cards, stapled to the wall. And I was looking around, and this is a true story. There was one of the cards that said, copy editor. I did not know what that actually was, but I understood the word edit, and so I went in and applied. Clearly the only applicant, because they offered me the job. I was 19 years old. I'm 64, and I have been in publishing ever since. True story. Started out in magazines, worked for newspapers, got into book publishing, worked in the Random House universe for years. Used to be publisher at Time-Warner in New York, and I started working as an agent in 1998, and then started my own agency 16 years ago. So MacGregor Literary is the name of my company. I realized that I was told that they've never had an agent speak here at the conference before. Just so that you all know, as indie authors, I'm also the author of more than 60 books, and I've done a couple of hundred writers' conferences. And the fact is, I was an early adopter to the notion of authors having an indie life as well as a trad life. I'm going to talk about that in my other workshop in a couple of hours. If you're interested, come talk. But in this one, we're going to talk about foreign rights. So here's how it's going to work. I'm just going to explain the process for doing foreign rights to foreign books. And then I'm going to offer you some things to keep in mind, which I have found to be important. So I have worked in the foreign rights office or department at a publishing house, and as well as having been a publisher and been over foreign rights, and then having worked as an agent for the last 24, 25 years. We sell a lot of foreign rights, and so I'm going to talk about the process, offer some things that you should keep in mind, and then let you ask whatever questions, because I know what it's like to come to a conference and the guy gets up and starts talking about stuff, and it's like, oh great, the one thing I wanted to know, and he never actually covered. So having worked as an agent for the last an introductory comment on years. Just so you know, if you read anything, we sell a lot of foreign 5 years ago. I'm going to talk about the process or anything, offer some insight to foreign rights that you can pretty well ignore it, and then everything ask whatever questions, because I know what it's like to come to a conference. The guy gets up and starts. I have yet to see an article on this. The one thing I wanted to know for foreign rights with the pandemic, and the reason is because there were so many countries that were bringing in books and authors, products and people before the pandemic, and then the pandemic came. Travel, came to a screeching halt. Shipping books, hard copies of books, came to a screeching halt. And what happened is a lot of those countries simply realized, we should focus on our own damn authors. So consequently, whereas there used to be a ton of romance writers, for example, who could get published in the Netherlands, right now the Netherlands is focused on Netherlands authors. There used to be a lot of American authors who got published in Sweden. I have a sister who married a Swede. They've been living over there for the last 30 years. My daughter just finished her PhD over in Sweden. We know a lot about the Swedish publishing market. The fact is, that just came to a screeching halt. And the reason is because during the pandemic, when things stopped, both publishers as well as the reading public realized, we could focus on our own people. And so things have really changed significantly just in the last couple of years. Again, something that I don't see being written about anywhere. But Frankfurt Book Fair just happened, and if you're unfamiliar, the largest book fair in the world, and it was amazing to see the conversations going on where people just weren't sure that they wanted to bring in more American product. So that's why I say it's an interesting world right now. So just how to do this, how to make it work. I'm going to offer. I had sent a slideshow, now realizing that my email, the program that I'm using on my Mac, the email went through, but it deleted all the attachments. So. Make sure you actually have the rights. People, when they've signed to do something somewhere, either with a book or a book, even with Amazon, some kind of attachment to foreign rights. So you're going to have to research. That means you're out. And part of researching is understanding the actual market for your book. Generally talk with 4 or 5 categories. One is North American rights, which is, we say North America, but it still tends to be English rights in U.S. and Canada and the Caribbean. Sometimes they'll broaden that to what they say are English language rights, and they will include the UK and South Africa and Ireland and Australia and New Zealand. But generally, we talk about North American rights. We talk about European rights, which, as you can imagine, Europe, for those who failed geography, is not actually a country. So there's a number of languages there in Europe, but we talk about Europe in whole, or en masse. We talk about Asia. And we talk about what we call ROW. ROW is short for rest of world. So if you're ever reading something and somebody says, well, you know, we've done really well with North American and Asian rights, but we're working on ROW, that's exactly what they mean. Of course, you have to know that, I mean, the best book market on the planet is right here in the US. It's huge. It's huge and it's diverse. And people are interested in all kinds of stories. One of the things that the reason I say that we talk about the categories in either 4 or 5, North American, European, Asian, and ROW, is because obviously what's been left out there is Spanish language rights, which has been tied to North American rights sometimes and has been tied to ROW sometimes. But the fact is it's really emerging, especially coming out of COVID, it's really emerging as its own category. All the countries in Central and South America suddenly looking for books, suddenly having more people who are literate, who can read, who are interested in buying books. So that's the first thing, is do some research on it. You have to understand the market for your book. So partly it's where do you want to take it, and of course any country, whether it's readers or publishers that you're looking at, their number one rule is, have you had successful sales in the US? That's going to be the first thing that they look for. Now, I know people, as writers, you're artists, and people always want to say, yeah, but there's, you know, I haven't necessarily had great sales, but I've got great, strong thematic connection, thematic content for this particular part of the world. You know, we're trying to sell it into the Spanish language market, and the characters are all, they all have, Latin names, and or the setting, it's all in, it's in Chile and it's in Paraguay. Yeah, well, I've got news for you. The fact is, generally as American writers, that tends not to be as strong as you think it's going to be. What they really care about is that the U.S. is the market. How'd the book do well when you were selling it here? So research. The second thing that I want to mention to you in terms of doing this is the sale. So again, you'll notice a theme here. Basically 4 ways you're going to make a sale. You can go to a foreign rights agent, and yes, if you're unfamiliar, there are agents who specialize just in foreign rights. So, for example, if you talk to the people at Grey Wolf does probably half of all the English language rights that are going into Asia. And there's countries, there are companies that focus, like, for example, just in China, just in Russia, just in French language countries. So one option would be you could approach a foreign rights agent. A second is you could approach a scout. A scout usually works for either a publisher or an agency, literary agency, and they are tasked with finding books that will work in a particular market. So, for example, earlier this year, we had a scout approach us about a story we had done here in the United States with Simon and Schuster. It's a memoir, it's a nonfiction, it's a true story. A guy who spent 22 years undercover, and they were really interested in it. And the reason is because there's this growing interest in those kinds of stories. And so consequently, I had a scout approach me. So sometimes you can go right to a foreign rights agent. Sometimes you can talk to a scout. One of the places you'll meet scout will be at big publishing conferences, by the way. And they'll usually have a list of things that they're looking for because they've been hired specifically to say, for example, we are looking for military and police stories. We are looking for gritty crime dramas. We are looking for true crime, whatever it is. A third way is you can sometimes talk to a literary agent. I just so that you know, there are some of us who do foreign rights deals, but not every agent does. As a matter of fact, the majority of agents in this country don't do their own foreign rights, and so they may or may not be able to help you. And the fourth thing is, obviously, you can do it yourself, which is what you're really interested in. Approaching, whether you are approaching a publisher to help do it in that country, or whether you're trying to do it yourself. So, I said, you're going to research, you're going to figure out how to sell. The third thing is you're going to have to think about translation. Just so you know, you cannot just use translation software. You can't just, and I'm sure you know that. If you've ever seen things that have been translated, use Google Translate or something into a language and then back out of the language. So an interesting thing, there's a term of endearment in China, Chip Chip. So, my name is Chip. Yeah. So, every time anything goes through any kind of translation software into Chinese and back to me, I become Chip Chip. Yeah. So, translation is usually the hardest part of this, and you have to think about, I'm basically doing one of three things. I'm either going to sell a company the translation rights for my book. So I've got a novel, and I go to a publisher in Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast is a French-speaking country, so we're going to sell them the rights to do the book in the Ivory Coast, and they're going to translate it in French. Rights sales. Or you are going to translate it yourself, or hire a translator to try and sell it in there. Not something I recommend because the cost of getting a good translation is spendy, just so that you know. And again, I don't trust most translation software. Or are you just going to sell the English language rights because English has really replaced French as, I hate the term, but the lingua franca. It's, yeah, exactly. Thank you for laughing at it. One guy got the particular literary allusion there. So you're going to have to decide how you're going to do that. Just so you know, that means that as you start dealing with other countries and sales, you're going to have to decide if this is going to be an English language book or a translated book. I will tell you right now what a lot of authors are doing is they're hiring somebody to translate the first 2 or possibly 3 chapters into the other language. So they're hiring somebody who's good at this, but it's not that much money. The fact is, can I pay you less than $500 to translate the first couple of chapters of my book? Using that, to talk to publishers. So if you're going to talk to publisher in that country, that is something that a lot of people are doing. If you're going to simply self-publish, if you're going to be an indie publisher in other countries, I just want you to know Amazon is not your friend here. I know Amazon's here, and I know they're helping to sponsor the conference and everything. Amazon does many great things. When it comes to foreign rights, Amazon is not your friend. Amazon obviously has a US version, a UK version. They've got a Canadian version. Amazon also has versions in Brazil, Japan, Spain, Italy, Germany, and France. Unfortunately, the French the French Amazon is not actually accessible worldwide, which becomes a problem, when you have French speakers in Africa who can't access the French Amazon titles. Also, the rules, Amazon is set up country by country, so just as in with book publishers where the rules are different from country to country, the rules with Amazon, even though it's the same parent company, they are different from one country to the next. I'll give you one example that you'll find. In some countries, they will only pay on page reads instead of, they'll only pay you on page reads instead of, hey, somebody, they bought my ebook, they downloaded it, they're reading it, and you get paid. Not all Amazons work that way. Again, this is one of those where it's research how you're going to do it. You're going to think about how you're going to sell it. You're going to look at the translation issues. And then, obviously, you have to be able to pitch the concept. And I know that you guys all know about that because you're here at the conference where everybody's talking about this is what we're doing to market our books. I do want you to know something that I think is absolutely key to success with foreign rights. As an American, if you haven't been reading the headlines lately, our reputation tends to go up and down around the world. We always think everybody's going to love us. They don't. So, foreign rights, if anybody asked me what's the absolute key to success with foreign rights, I would say, without hesitation, relationships. It is. It's all about relationships. It is foreign rights, doing your book and actually selling it to people, whether you're selling it to a publisher or you're selling it directly to readers. In foreign countries, it is all about relationships. If you establish good relationships with publishers and with readers in another country, which obviously takes time and investment and patience, then you can make money doing it. But there are things, it is so much about relationships. And one of the issues with relationships is here in the United States, we tend to be in a hurry. And I mean, look, we got a schedule here and we're going to follow it. I've got a timer over here that tells me I've got 26 minutes and 45 seconds left. So that is how we run our lives. That is not the way much of the world works. So you just learn. There's patience that is required in getting books produced and sold to people in other countries. One of the things that will really help you there is anything you can show publishers and readers that we would consider sort of part of the package that we're putting together. So things like, what have the sales been in all formats in this country? What kind of endorsements have you got? And is there anybody recognizable in the country that you're going to? What kind of links can you have where people can link onto it and either watch a YouTube clip or read a review or something like that, so that it makes sense in their particular culture? What kind of media coverage have you had in this country? All of that information is something that they're going to want to know, and you're going to want to use to your advantage when you move into another country. Again, so I talked about research. We talked about translations. We talked about sales. one of the last thing just is when you're actually pitching the concept or pitching the book, you can try direct, but you have to figure out avenues for getting into other countries and other languages. This is really important, and this is one of the reasons why you may want to talk to somebody who is who really understands the language and culture in the country that you're going to. Don't assume that because you read Jane Austen, you understand how everything works in the UK. My family's from Scotland, and I love going over there. I love seeing family. But every time I go, I'm reminded, oh yeah, they're different than we are. There's some real different cultural things, and not everything in the books that I represent are going to translate well into this culture, even though they speak the same language, more or less. It's, you go to Glasgow and you can't understand anything. So, hey, would you like a whoa? Which is, hey, would you like a bottle of water in Glasgow, by the way. Okay, so those are sort of the keys to making this work. I wanted to throw out some things, just some thoughts that I think you need to keep in mind. Some little things that as I was like making notes to myself about what have we done, what are the things that I've learned. One of the things is, please keep in mind time differences, which you wouldn't think is important until you start talking to somebody who's helping you in Australia. Oh my God, these people they're on it is so hard to schedule a meeting with somebody in Australia when, it is, it's 6 p.m. here. And it's like, it's 7 a.m. there. That's one of the little things that people, particularly on the West Coast, where on the West Coast, we tend to be familiar with the fact that, okay, New York is 3 hours later than us. And New Yorkers tend to understand that, okay, London is 5 hours later than us. But man, and sometimes you just don't know. Like you get into African countries and it's like, I have no idea what time it is there. Be aware of time differences. Be aware of the expense, because expenses with foreign rights can get away from you. Just so you know, you're trying to make money at this. And I've said this to so many people over the years. Look, you're trying to make money at this. So if you are paying somebody to translate the first couple of chapters, and then you're investing in some kind of a software to send it over to them, and then you're making sure and you're checking, or you're spending money on some long distance call program and everything. The fact is, look, some markets are small, and you just have to realize it. People in the UK are readers, and you can make money in the UK. As big as the country of Germany is, that is a country where it can be tough to make money, and there's not a lot of German-speaking countries whereas there are a lot of French-speaking countries. And where it's really tough? You get up into like Sweden and Denmark and Norway and Finland, where they have great reading cultures because there's nothing else to do. Ice fishing and aquavit, which go together really well, by the way. Great reading cultures, but there's no other country that speaks Finnish, Great line in Eat, Pray, Love, where she's asked why, of all the languages, why did you decide to study Italian? And if you recall, she says, because I decided if Italy ever again invades Ethiopia, there will be 2 countries that speak Italian. So, be aware of time, be aware of expense, and because sometimes the money can be small. Now, the good news is, if you do a book which reaches into a culture and really speaks to the culture, and it starts to sell, you have very little competition, or you have considerably less competition than you have in this country, where it always feels like every time you come out with a book, there's 200,000 other titles that are just releasing, and it's hard to get noticed. This is one of the reasons why any media you can get in the country that you're targeting, it can be really important. Because in a small country, I'll tell you, for example, New Zealand, if you can get some positive some positive media interest in New Zealand, which is an English-speaking country. Oh my gosh, everybody knows about it. New Zealand is basically just a big, small town. And so that's one of the things that a lot of people, they just don't know. I realize not all books can travel. Not all books can travel, and not all books are going to sell well into foreign markets. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out, do I have something that I think can move into this culture? That, just like our publishing market, it changes all the time. Things will get hot and then things will cool off. They'll be totally interested in, for example, there's been a movement in Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark. There was a strong movement to get into sort of dark crime stories. So we all read The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and that series, and some other people. They're actually moving out of that. Now, that's not to say that they won't do anything like that, but they've actually moved out of that. So suddenly what's happened is a country will sometimes still fall in love with a concept or an author. They'll fall in love with a genre. And what you have to do is you simply have to research to get to know the country. What are the readers looking for? It's really tough to match up pub dates unless you do it yourself. Another reason why you might want to consider, if you're doing a foreign book, if you're working a foreign market, to do it yourself, because it is really tough to match up pub dates. I can tell you that notion of patience. Look, in some countries, in some cultures, if you say, "Look, I need this, next week," next week means future week at some point, and that happens frequently. And so what happens is I've seen authors try and line things up where we've got, my book is releasing, in 5 countries the same week. And I will tell you, I rarely see it happen. I will see it release in one country one week and a couple of weeks later someplace else. After Christmas someplace else. Another one next year. And that just happens. And that, just so that, again, I'm just saying, one of the things to keep in mind, it's tough to match up pub dates. It's also tough to be really firm on pricing. Actually, pricing things can be tough. Do you guys know about the Big Mac Index? Has anybody talked about the Big Mac Index? So the guys at The Economist magazine came up with the Big Mac Index. They were trying to figure out how do we determine what local prices should be on items. And they use McDonald's Big Mac as their baseline. So a Big Mac costs, I haven't been to a McDonald's in years, $1.99? Anybody know?
No, like $5 or $6.
Wow. Okay. Sorry. I'm 64. So yeah, inflation. No, actually, I don't know if you saw that. They discovered traces of meat in a Big Mac recently. So what The Economist did was they came up with a Big Mac Index. So they look, what does a Big Mac cost here in the U.S.? What does it cost in Britain? What does it cost in France? What does it cost in Belgium? And they use that as basically the multiplier to figure out this is what things should be priced. You got to come up with something, and the Big Mac Index. So what's funny is what started out, I think, as, a kind of a sort of a shortcut, kind of a cutesy way. It's turned into a big deal. Publishers use it all the time. So you as an indie author can use that. You can, it's simple enough to say, well, I'm going to look at Amazon. I'm going to look at, Amazon France to figure out what ebooks are selling at or what print books are selling at. But just so you know, that there are some resources out there like the Big Mac Index. Pricing can be really tough because you just don't know what people are willing to pay. I can tell you, having done lots of books in Asia and in Europe, that people are willing to pay much more in Europe than they are in Asia for a book. And they're willing to pay much more in Asia than they are in Africa for a book. So it's one of those things where sometimes it can be really tough to make money even as an indie author in some countries. Remember that if you work with a publisher to actually let them translate your book and everything like that, you're going to have a contract. The contract's going to have a term on it. That is, it's not an open-ended thing. It's going to be if you were to do this in another country, and sign with a publisher to let them translate and produce and sell your book, there's going to be an actual term on it. So it's going to be for 3, 5, or 7 years, most likely. And I will say that contracts in other countries tend to be far less complex than they are in this country, which is, lawyers run amok in this country. The new Simon & Schuster contract. The new Simon & Schuster contract is 28 pages long, and it's in 6-point type, for crying out loud. So we just did a contract with a Russian publisher, Ekmos. It's basically a page and a half. And it's and it covers the essentials. It still covers the essentials. It's just, okay, you're going to send us this book. Here's the title. Here's the author. We're going to release it here. And we get to figure out how much we charge for it. And a couple of times a year, we'll send you a check. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the essentials. So you see that with a lot of foreign contracts. I always say to people, anytime you have a contract question, you are welcome if you're in one of these sessions. I've been talking about, as far as I know, I was the first guy to actually do contract workshops at publishing conferences, because I was like the contract weenie, But the fact is, I always say to people who come to these, if you ever have a contract question about something, feel free to just email me. And I don't promise to get to it like that day, but I try and answer anybody who sends me a contract question. Again, I've been working in publishing all my life. I have seen so many authors get screwed, or just... And sometimes they didn't. I think sometimes the company that they're dealing with didn't mean to screw them. They just didn't know any better. But again, publishers are not your friend. They are simply vendors that you work with. It doesn't mean that they're out to screw you. They're out to make as much money as they can. So if you ever have a contract question, you feel free to come to me. And last thing I'm going to say on this, and then I'm going to let you ask questions. Again. If you decide to do your book in another country, be aware that the way you're paid may be fairly unique. I mention that only because the U.S. government, anytime you get money in from a foreign country, they tend to watch that very closely. And they also tend to tax it. There's a surprise. And so the way you get paid can be really interesting. And it's one of the things that nobody ever seems to talk about. But are you paid in U.S. dollars? Are you paid in French francs? Are you paid? And sometimes the units of currency used in other countries will change. And so it's one of those things, you have to watch it. You have to track it. This is the thing I say to my authors all the time. When you are getting money in from another country, the U.S. government will pay attention to that because they watch currency coming in from other countries very carefully. So you have to figure out, you have to keep track of how much you made, what currency it was paid in, and then, how much of it I'm going to have to send to the government, which the short answer is most of it. You're going to have to, So, okay, I know I went over a bunch of things, and I know this is a bit like trying to get a drink out of a fire hose. It's kind of all coming at you at once, but I wanted just to introduce people to the concept because I do think that foreign rights is a bit of an untapped area for most indie authors. They tend to, they tend to be afraid of it. It's like, I don't know how to do that. Or they tend to take the simplistic approach. Well, my book's on Amazon. I'll just post it over there on Amazon. It's like, well, nobody in that country is actually seeing it, so sorry. So there are some things to think through where I think you can actually put a plan together. But I'm telling you, I was saying for years that audiobooks are going to explode. And then they did. And when we look at untapped sources, I'm telling you in the future, foreign markets for U.S. authors, there's money to be made out there. And we're going to see more and more of that. So I'm going to let people ask questions. I'll use this as a segue. If you got a question, just come stand at the microphone here. But so just as a segue, things change all the time in this country. And so like I say, if you thought you knew something or you read an article about foreign rights pre-COVID, you probably will find that it's changed significantly. So I'm not the answer man. If I don't know the answer, I promise you I will not bullshit you. I will not give you some, oh, it's this. If I don't really know, I'll just tell you, I don't know, but I'll find out. It's a lovely costume you got on. Is this cosplay day?
Thank you, Chip. It's not a cosplay. It's just like a little overcoat because I'm wearing like a t-shirt and yoga pants, and so it just makes me look fancy.
Great.
I'm a mom of 3 kids, so I try to find shortcuts. Chip, thank you for being here, and thank you very much for giving us this information. You mentioned that the foreign rights deals with foreign publishers are going to have a term limit. Is it what usually happens to the translation after that's over? Do they usually keep the rights to the translation but just put it in a vault and never use it because obviously they don't have the rights to use it? Is that what usually happens?
Yes. Actually, the first thing that will happen is they will simply want to extend the term with you. However, if they pay for the translation, they will claim that they get to keep the translation.
Well, and that's fair if they paid for it. Is it normal? I mean, if I, as an indie author, ask like, "Hey, I'd like to buy the rights to that translation from you, so I don't have to redo it," is that pretty normal? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, the friendliest language that I've found that Spanish language publishers and Spanish language companies and everything like that, they'll routinely, oh yeah, that's fine. You can just have it.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's nice. In terms of buying it, if I bought the rights to the translation, are they then licensing me to use the translation, but they keep the copyright to the translation, or do I get the copyright to the translation?
That's a great question, and it will depend on the deal that you.
So there is a difference, and I would want to obviously the most beneficial thing.
What you want to do is when they send you the document, you want to read it very carefully to see who actually owns the copyright.
Yeah.
On this. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You guys understand the interesting artistic questions happening here is because Jill has written this book and it's her book. Jose translated it, and and so then wait a minute. So whose work is it? You see what I mean? It's collaboration. So usually the company that pays for the translation owns the translation. Will they sell it or give it to an author? Sometimes, yes. But then who has the copyright on it? And you just have to check the contract to see.
Okay.
Okay.
And I guess I'll let other people go. I'll circle back around.
Great. We've got 8 minutes left, so happy to answer any questions you have. Yes, sir.
Okay. I've actually got 2 questions, Chip.
Okay.
First off, thanks. Great job. Very much appreciated. The first question, and I doubt that you probably know this one, but does the Kindle Unlimited rights extend to foreign nations such as New Zealand and Australia?
So, as I understand it, Kindle Unlimited used to, as I understand it, Kindle Unlimited used to extend to Anusa, I think it's Australia,
New Zealand, US.
And that other one. There were 3. No, it's anyway. However, I've been told now because of Amazon Australia getting going that has changed. I haven't had to do a deal there with them yet, so I'm not actually sure. But yes, it used to extend.
Okay, I'll just have to research that one. My second question, I'll try to keep this one quick, is I'm planning on going to New Zealand for a nice 6-week trip.
Yeah, I'd love to come. Thanks.
I'd like to invite you, but sorry, I got bitten on the 2020 cancellation by the way, travel insurance does not cover pandemics, just to let everybody know.
Yeah.
Ouch. So question is, when it comes to English rights, is that something that, because I have copyright in the United States, I would sell them my rights in New Zealand to a publisher?
You'd license them.
License.
Yeah, you'd license the rights and there are publishers, for example, Simon & Schuster. Simon & Schuster has offices in Australia specifically so that their English language rights they can use in the U.S., Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, the Caribbean, and South Africa. And that's actually why they have offices there, so that when they get English language rights, they can do it in all those countries and they don't have to relicense it. Yeah. Yep.
So I have a series that's finished, it's complete. Let's say it does very well. Good reviews, lots of sales in the U.S.
Congrats.
If I wanted to approach an agent, yes, I know that you mentioned a lot of different avenues you could take, but the agent is the easy button. Yes, you get less money from it, but they can maybe do a lot of work that I don't have the bandwidth for. What do you recommend? How do you start that? Because I have tried querying
Yeah.
Google
I-
foreign agents,
Yeah.
where would you suggest beginning
Yeah.
to start that?
Yeah. The great conundrum, it's a great question, by the way. The great conundrum, of course, is with agents. Well, the agent won't talk to me unless I'm published, and I can't get published unless the agent will talk to me. I know. I've been doing this forever, and I continue to face that same issue. What I would say is, if you are thinking about, doing foreign deals with it, then are you on Publishers Marketplace already? Okay, so pay your $20 a month, get a subscription to Publishers Marketplace, publishersmarketplace.com. They have a database there that they keep of editors, publishers, imprints, authors, and agents. You can go to the agent section and you can simply see, like, I'm trying to get a deal in Russia or in the Philippines or in Japan. Who are the agents that have worked that area? For $20 a month, it's a great research tool because you go to the database and, boop, 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 suddenly the list comes up. Here are the names, the contact information of all the agents who have done deals in Japan, who have done deals with U.S. authors or U.S. projects in Japan. Now, it's imperfect in that it doesn't record everything. And the reason is because it's basically self-reported. So if you have an agency that never reports anything, well, you don't know about it. But that's the easiest way to get started, because then you can go to an agent and say, hey, I know you do. So a lot of people do this, with the company that does, like, say, about half the deals in all of Asia. They'll simply approach Greyhawk and they'll say, I did this indie series. It sold 100,000 copies. There were 5 books that sold 100,000 copies. I would one of the characters is one of the characters is Chinese, or part of the action is there's a Chinese thing that comes in the story. There's a Chinese tech thing that comes in the story. But I would love to try and get this into China. And, you put together a package, but approach them. And that way, at least you're approaching people who work in that field, who work in that particular area, rather than just, picking up a phone book and dialing a number kind of thing. Does that help? Yeah? Okay. I've got 2.5 minutes left.
Yes, I know in Germany, if you get a translator in Germany, there's some German laws that are in place that require a royalty if they translate your book. And so some people are getting translators in the U.S. that are German speaking. Is there any other countries that have laws for translation that require a royalty share that we should be aware of? Thank you.
There are. So that's the question was recorded, right? Their questions were recorded? Were their questions recorded?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure that otherwise I was going to repeat the question. France used to be that way, and I have been told, that by one publisher, that is no longer true. We don't have to pay a royalty to the translator. And I was like, great, until I was told by another publisher, no, what they told you is not true at all. We have to pay. So it would make sense in France because there are so many countries that speak French. Frankly, it makes less sense in German to me because it's not nearly as widespread a language. But those are the two that I'm aware of. Yeah, French and German. And did you have one other question?
I can ask you that.
Well, I've got 1 minute left, so if you want.
Now it's left my head, sorry.
That's okay.
I just had a kid 6 weeks ago, so brain up there.
Okay, so I'll wrap up with this. Again, if you have questions, you are welcome to reach out to me and ask. Again, if I don't know, I will just tell you, I don't know. But I'm happy to answer questions. My name is Chip. My email is chip@macgregorliterary.com. It's just my last name. Note that MacGregor has an A in it. chip@macgregorliterary.com, and I'm happy to answer questions. You guys have been very nice. Thanks for being here, laughing at my jokes. I appreciate it. All right, enjoy the conference.